My name is Stephanie Mitchell, and I'm 27 years old. The day I graduated from business school should have been the proudest moment of my life. After working 3 jobs to pay my tuition, I scanned the crowd for my father's face. He wasn't there. Instead, my phone buzzed with a text, "Congratulations, but don't expect any help from me anymore. You're on your own now." I fought back tears as I clutched my diploma. Little did I know that 4 years later, my CFO would call about our company's $2 billion IPO. Before I tell you my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever had to prove someone wrong who doubted you. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Boston, where life seemed pretty normal until I turned 12. That's when everything changed. My parents' divorce wasn't just the end of their marriage, it was the beginning of my father's emotional distance. Jason Mitchell was what most people would call successful. He worked his way up to become a senior investment banker at a prestigious firm downtown. His suits were always perfectly pressed, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. But underneath that polished exterior was a man who measured everything, including relationships, by their financial value. After the divorce, our Sunday dinners became monthly visits, then occasional phone calls. My mother, Alana, worked double shifts as an ER nurse to keep our household afloat. I'd often wake up to find her asleep on the couch, still in her scrubs, having come home too tired to make it to her bedroom. Despite her exhaustion, she never missed a school event or forgot to ask about my day. "Your father loves you in his own way," she would say whenever I cried about his absence. Some people just don't know how to show it. By high school, I had developed a passion for business, but not the kind my father respected. While he believed in traditional investment banking and corporate finance, I became fascinated by sustainable technology and innovative startups. I remember excitedly telling him about my business idea during one of our rare dinners. "Green technology is the future, Dad," I explained, barely touching my food because I was so animated. "Imagine a platform that connects eco-conscious investors with sustainable startups." He barely looked up from his steak. "That's a nice hobby, Stephanie, but it's not a serious career path. Real money is in traditional markets. Always has been." His dismissal stung, but it also fueled my determination. When it came time for college applications, I applied to business programs that specialized in innovation and sustainability. Boston University has an amazing business program, my father said when I showed him my acceptance letters. Their finance track would give you connections to all the major firms. "I'm going to Northeastern," I told him. "Their entrepreneurship program is exactly what I want." I still remember how his face hardened. "I'm not paying for you to chase pipe dreams." And he didn't. Unlike my friends whose parents had college funds set up, I was on my own. I worked as a barista from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m., attended classes until 3 p.m., then waitressed until midnight. On weekends, I did data entry for a local company. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. My mother helped when she could, slipping me grocery money or buying me a new laptop when mine died during finals week. "I believe in you," she whispered, hugging me tight. "You're going to change things someday." During my junior year, I developed the initial business plan for GreenSync, my platform that would connect sustainable businesses with investors who cared about environmental impact. I spent countless nights refining the algorithm that would match companies and investors based on specific sustainability goals and financial metrics. When I made the dean's list that semester, I sent my father a text with the news, hoping for some acknowledgement. His response came 3 days later: "Good. Keep it up." Those 3 words summarized our relationship perfectly. He wasn't cruel or abusive. He was absent and indifferent, which in some ways hurt more. I couldn't hate him, but I couldn't rely on him either. By senior year, I had a solid business plan, a basic prototype of my platform, and a growing network of contacts in the sustainable business community. What I didn't have was my father's approval or support. A week before graduation, I called him. "I'm graduating next Saturday at 10 a.m., I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It would mean a lot if you could come." "I'll try to make it," he said. "But I have a golf meeting with some clients that might run long." I hung up knowing what "I'll try" meant in my father's language. Still, Some childish part of me held on to hope that he'd show up, that he'd finally see my worth. That hope was what made his text on graduation day all the more crushing. But as I stood there in my cap and gown, something hardened inside me. If I was truly on my own, then I would succeed on my own. And one day, he would regret not being part of my journey. The weight of my phone felt like a brick in my hand as I read my father's message again. Congratulations, but don't expect any help from me anymore. You're on your own now. The screen blurred as tears welled up in my eyes. Around me, families embraced their graduates, taking photos and planning celebration dinners. I stood alone in a sea of happiness. My fingers hovered over the call button. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. Maybe someone had taken his phone. I pressed dial and held my breath. 1 ring. 2 rings. 3. Then his voicemail. You've reached Jason Mitchell. Leave your name and number, and I'll get back to you if it's important. If it's important. As if his daughter's graduation wasn't important enough. Steph, there you are. My best friend Kayla Williams appeared, her own graduation gown flapping as she ran toward me. Her smile faltered when she saw my face. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. I showed her the text. Your dad is such a jerk, she said, pulling me into a hug. Forget him. Today is about celebrating you and all you've accomplished. My parents want to take us to Antonio's for lunch. They've already made reservations. Antonio's was an upscale Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of place I'd never be able to afford on my own. I almost declined, not wanting to intrude on their family celebration, but Kayla wouldn't hear of it. You're family to us, she insisted. Plus, my mom is dying to hear about your business plans. She told everyone at her book club that she knows the next female Elon Musk. Lunch with the Williams family was exactly what I needed. Mrs. Williams asked thoughtful questions about GreenSync, while Mr. Williams offered to introduce me to a friend who worked in venture capital. For a few hours, I forgot about my father's rejection and focused on the people who actually believed in me. After lunch, Kayla and I went back to my apartment, a tiny studio in a rundown building near campus. The rent was cheap, which was all that mattered to me. My office consisted of a second-hand desk crammed into the corner, a laptop with a cracked screen, and walls covered in sticky notes outlining my business strategy. So what's next for GreenSync? Kayla asked, flopping onto my futon, which also served as my bed. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I've identified 20 potential investors who specialize in sustainable tech. I'm sending out my proposal tonight. On graduation day? Girl, take a break. I shook my head. I can't afford to. I've got 3 months of savings, and then I'm broke. GreenSync needs to be generating income by then. The truth was, working kept me from thinking about my father. As long as I was focused on spreadsheets and emails, I didn't have to feel the hollow ache in my chest. I spent the next 4 hours refining my pitch deck and personalizing emails to each potential investor. My algorithm was unique. Instead of just matching investors with businesses based on financial projections, it incorporated sustainability metrics like carbon footprint reduction, resource conservation, and social impact. The platform would allow investors to build portfolios aligned with specific environmental goals while still maintaining strong financial returns. Kayla ordered pizza and watched a movie on her phone while I worked. Around midnight, she left for her own apartment, making me promise to do something fun tomorrow. But tomorrow would bring more work. I had 3 final interviews for entry-level positions at local tech companies, backup plans in case GreenSync didn't take off immediately. I needed a steady income while building my company. After sending the last investment proposal, I checked my emails one more time. There was a new message from an address I didn't recognize. Nora Plee at Mitchell Investments. Calm, my heart jumped. Had my father changed his mind? I clicked it open, only to find an automated newsletter from his company announcing their new fund focused on traditional energy investments. The irony wasn't lost on me. While I was developing a platform for sustainable businesses, my father was doubling down on fossil fuels. Exhaustion suddenly hit me like a wave. I rested my head on my keyboard, telling myself I'd just close my eyes for a minute. The next thing I knew, Sunlight was streaming through my window, and I had keyboard imprints on my cheek. My phone showed 3 new emails, automated responses from the investors I'd contacted, promising to review my materials. Not quite the enthusiastic replies I'd hoped for, but it was a start. As I showered and prepared for my job interviews, I made myself a promise. I would build GreenSync into a success with or without my father's help. And one day, when he saw my name in business publications, he would regret not believing in me. I didn't know then how difficult the path would be or how many times I would question this decision. But that morning, with graduation behind me and an uncertain future ahead, determination burned brighter than hurt. I was on my own, and maybe that was exactly what I needed to be. 3 months after graduation, I stared at my laptop screen in dismay. Another rejection email, the 12th this week. This one from Horizon Ventures, a firm I'd been certain would at least grant me an interview. While your concept is interesting, we don't see sufficient market validation at this time. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. Future endeavors. The polite business equivalent of "don't call us, we'll call you." I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, glancing around the small cubicle that had become my daytime home. 2 weeks after graduation, with no investor bites and my savings dwindling, I'd accepted a position as a junior marketing coordinator at TechNow, a mid-sized software company in Boston. The pay was barely enough to cover my rent and student loan payments, but it offered health insurance and, more importantly, left my evenings and weekends free to work on GreenSync. My boss, a harried woman named Nancy, had made it clear that creativity and initiative weren't particularly valued. "Just follow the templates," she'd said during my orientation. "Don't reinvent the wheel." Each day felt like a slow draining of my soul, creating generic email campaigns for products I didn't care about. But each night, I'd come alive again, working on GreenSync until my eyes burned from staring at the screen. "Mitchell," Nancy's voice cut through my thoughts. "I need those email metrics by 3 p.m. Where are they?" Just finishing them up, I called back, quickly opening the spreadsheet I'd completed an hour ago but had been too distracted to send. As I emailed the report, my phone buzzed with a calendar reminder: Business Innovation Conference, 6 p.m. I'd nearly forgotten. The conference was being held downtown, and while the $75 ticket had been painful to purchase, it promised networking opportunities with potential investors and partners. After work, I rushed home to change into my one professional outfit, a navy blue blazer and pencil skirt I'd found at a thrift store. The blazer was slightly too big, but with the sleeves rolled up, it looked intentional rather than ill-fitting. The conference venue was intimidating, a gleaming high-rise with a marble lobby and security guards who checked attendees against a list. Inside, waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres while well-dressed professionals chatted in small groups. I accepted a glass of champagne to have something to do with my hands and scanned the room for approachable faces. That's when I saw him, my father, standing near the windows with 2 other men in expensive suits. My first instinct was to leave, but something kept me rooted to the spot. Maybe this was my chance to show him what I was building, to make him understand that my pipe dream had real potential. I took a deep breath and walked toward him. "Dad?" He turned, surprise briefly crossing his face before his features settled into polite neutrality. "Stephanie, I didn't know you'd be here." "I'm networking for my company," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "GreenSync is gaining traction." "Is it?" He glanced at his watch. "That's nice." "Excuse me, I need to speak with the keynote speaker before his presentation." He walked away without introducing me to his colleagues or asking a single question about my business. I stood there, champagne glass in hand, feeling like I'd been slept. "First time at one of these things?" a voice asked. I turned to see a man about my age, with kind eyes and a slightly rumpled suit. "Is it that obvious?" I asked. "Only because you look as uncomfortable as I feel," he said with a smile. "I'm Marcus Reynolds. I run a tech incubator for new startups." For the next hour, Marcus listened as I explained GreenSync's concept. Unlike the investors who dismissed me via email, he asked thoughtful questions and offered constructive feedback. Your algorithm is innovative, he said, but your business model needs work. You're trying to serve too many types of clients at once. My advice? Focus on one segment initially, either the investors or the green businesses, and expand once you've proven the concept. When I mentioned my lack of technical expertise to build the platform properly, Marcus handed me his card. Come by my office next week. I might know some developers who'd be interested in your project. It was the first genuine offer of help I'd received, and it nearly brought me to tears. Later that night, back in my apartment, the emotional toll of seeing my father hit me full force. I curled up on my futon and finally allowed myself to cry, for the dad who couldn't see my worth, for the struggles I faced, for the exhaustion that had become my constant companion. A knock on my door interrupted my breakdown. Wiping my eyes, I opened it to find Brian Foster, my neighbor from across the hall. He was a quiet guy who worked as a programmer for a local gaming company. Sorry to bother you, he said, but your Wi-Fi name is GreenSync Founder, and I've been curious. Are you starting a company? 30 minutes later, Brian was sitting at my desk, looking through my business plan while I made coffee. This is actually really cool, he said. The matching algorithm you've outlined could work, but the technical infrastructure would be complex. That's the part I'm struggling with, I admitted. I can't afford to hire developers. Brian was silent for a moment, then said, "What if I helped? I do front-end development professionally, and I've been wanting to get involved with something meaningful. Maybe we could work out an equity arrangement." I nearly dropped my coffee mug. "You'd do that?" He shrugged. "The environmental focus appeals to me. Plus, it would be a great portfolio piece." That night, as Brian left with a copy of my business plan to review, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: hope. The next morning, I called Marcus and scheduled a meeting. Then I reopened my business model and began reworking it based on his feedback, focusing exclusively on eco-conscious investors as our initial market. 3 months of rejections had been painful, but they'd taught me an important lesson. Success wouldn't come from seeking approval, not from investors, not from my father, not from anyone. It would come from adapting, persisting, and finding the right people who shared my vision. As I revised my business plan late into the night, I realized that each no had pushed me toward a better version of GreenSync. And perhaps being on my own, as my father had so coldly put it, was exactly what my business needed to evolve. 6 months later, I stood in our tiny office space, really just a converted storage room in a rundown business complex, watching Brian put the finishing touches on GreenSync's beta platform. And we're live, he announced, pushing his chair back from the computer. The beta version is officially launched. I stared at the screen, where our logo, a green circuit board in the shape of a leaf, pulsed gently. After countless late nights, endless revisions, and more ramen noodles than I care to remember, GreenSync existed beyond my imagination. It was real, functional, and ready for users. Marcus had been true to his word, connecting us with his network and providing invaluable advice on refining our business model. With his guidance, we'd narrowed our focus to serving accredited investors interested in sustainable ventures, creating a curated marketplace of pre-vetted green startups. Our beta launch was small, just 50 investors and 20 startups invited to test the platform. But it was a start. "We should celebrate," Brian suggested, reaching for his jacket. "First round's on me." "Rain check," I replied, already opening my email. "I want to monitor user activity and catch any bugs right away." Brian shook his head but didn't argue. He'd grown accustomed to my obsessive work habits over the past months. As my technical co-founder, he'd invested countless unpaid hours into building GreenSync, believing in my vision when few others did. The first week after launch was a blur of troubleshooting, user feedback, and minor panic attacks. Our platform wasn't perfect. Several investors reported confusion with the matching algorithm, and 2 startups had trouble uploading their financial documents. But the core concept worked. By the end of the week, 3 startups had received meeting requests from investors, and 1 was already in preliminary funding discussions. Marcus called to check in, and I shared the early results. That's promising, he said. Now you need real money to scale. I'm organizing a pitch event next month for angel investors. You should present. The prospect was terrifying, pitching to a room full of wealthy investors who could make or break GreenSync's future. But we needed the capital. Our personal savings were depleted, and the small office space was already stretching our budget. For the next 4 weeks, I prepared obsessively for the pitch. I practiced in front of Brian, in front of the mirror, and even recorded myself to analyze my delivery. By the night before the event, I could recite our value proposition, market analysis, and financial projections in my sleep. The pitch event was held at an upscale hotel downtown. As I set up my presentation, my hands trembled slightly. Looking out at the audience, about 30 investors in business attire, sipping coffee and checking their phones, I spotted a familiar profile in the back row. My father. My heart dropped to my stomach. What was he doing here? Had Marcus invited him? I hadn't spoken to my father since our brief encounter at the business conference months ago. There was no time to process his presence. The moderator was already introducing me. Next up, we have Stephanie Mitchell presenting GreenSync, a platform connecting sustainable startups with eco-conscious investors. Taking a deep breath, I walked to the center of the stage. How many of you have wanted to invest in sustainable businesses, but struggled to find legitimate opportunities? I began, pushing thoughts of my father aside. And how many green startups have failed because they couldn't connect with the right investors? GreenSync solves both problems. For the next 10 minutes, I outlined our business model, demonstrated the platform, and shared our early traction metrics. As I spoke, I gained confidence, my voice growing stronger with each slide. I didn't look at my father again. This moment wasn't about him. During the Q&A session, the investors asked tough but fair questions. How would we vet startups? What was our revenue model? How did we plan to scale? I answered each one clearly, showing that I'd anticipated their concerns. As I packed up my presentation materials afterward, a tall man with salt and pepper hair approached me. Ms. Mitchell? Tyler Davidson from Emerald Ventures. You have an interesting platform there. Tyler handed me his card. Let's set up a meeting next week. I think my firm might be interested in a seed investment. I struggled to maintain my professional composure while internally screaming with excitement. That would be wonderful, Mr. Davidson. I'll email you some additional materials. As Tyler walked away, I noticed my father had disappeared. Of course he had. He'd probably come to watch me fail, and when I didn't, he couldn't bear to stick around. The meeting with Emerald Ventures exceeded all expectations. Tyler offered us $300,000 in seed funding, not an enormous amount by startup standards, but enough to hire 2 additional team members, move to a real office, and invest in marketing. The next 6 months were a whirlwind. We moved into a small but legitimate office space in Cambridge. We hired a marketing specialist and another developer. Our user base grew steadily, not explosively, but consistently. Each week brought new investors and startups to the platform. Our big break came unexpectedly. A sustainable fashion startup called EcoThread found their lead investor through GreenSync. The founder was interviewed on a popular business podcast and raved about our platform. We'd been trying to find aligned investors for months, she said. GreenSync matched us with the perfect funding partner in 2 weeks. The podcast went viral in entrepreneurial circles. Overnight, our user registrations tripled. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications. Among the emails was one from Jordan Blackwell, CFO of Leighton Venture Partners, one of the largest venture capital firms focused on sustainable investments. Your platform has caught our attention, the email read. We'd like to discuss a potential partnership. As I forwarded the email to Brian, I couldn't help but think about how far we'd come from that graduation day text. My father had cut me off, thinking I would fail without his support. Instead, his rejection had been the push I needed to prove that my vision was valid, not just to him, but to myself. When Leighton Venture Partners offered to lead our series of funding round with a $5 million investment, I finally allowed myself to believe that GreenSync wasn't just going to survive, it was going to thrive. And I had done it on my own terms, without compromising the sustainable values at the heart of our mission. The night after signing the term sheet, I sat alone in our office, looking out at the Boston skyline. I thought about texting my father the news, but decided against it. My success wasn't about proving him wrong anymore. It was about building something that mattered, to me, to our users, and to the planet. 1 year later, I stepped off the elevator into GreenSync's new headquarters, an entire floor in a gleaming office building with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. Our team had grown from 4 to 20, and our platform now hosted over 300 vetted sustainable startups and more than 1,000 accredited investors. "Morning," Stephanie called Kayla, who had joined us 6 months ago as our head of investor relations. After years of supporting my dream as a friend, she now helped bring it to life professionally. My office, an actual office with a door, not a converted storage room, was filled with reminders of our journey. The framed 30 Under 30 magazine cover featuring me among emerging business leaders. The first dollar earned from our platform fee. A small plant Brian had given me when we moved into our first real office space. "You have a 9 a.m. with the development team and an 11 a.m. with Tyler," my assistant reminded me as I settled at my desk. Tyler Davidson, our first investor, had become a regular presence since his firm increased their stake in our Series B round. While I appreciated his early belief in GreenSync, his vision for the company had begun to diverge from mine in concerning ways. The development meeting went smoothly. Our tech team was rolling out new features to help investors track the environmental impact of their investments beyond financial returns. It was exactly the kind of innovation that had made GreenSync unique in the marketplace. At precisely 11 a.m., Tyler strode into my office without knocking. "Great news," he announced, taking a seat across from me. "I've been talking with Nexus Capital about our expansion strategy. They're interested in acquiring a significant stake in GreenSync." I frowned. "Nexus Capital? Aren't they heavily invested in traditional energy companies?" Tyler waved dismissively. "They're diversifying. The point is, they have deep pockets and global reach. With their backing, we could scale GreenSync internationally within months." "At what cost?" I asked. "Our mission is to support truly sustainable businesses. Nexus would push us to water down our vetting standards to increase volume." "That's business, Stephanie," Tyler said, leaning forward. "Look, you've built something impressive here, but to reach the next level, we need to be more flexible about who we work with. Flexible about our core values? That's not why investors and startups trust us." Tyler's expression hardened. "The board meeting is next week. I'll be proposing this partnership formally. I suggest you think carefully about your position. Remember who helped you when nobody else would." After he left, I sat in silence, thinking about the crossroads before me. GreenSync had grown beyond my wildest dreams, but with growth came pressure to compromise. Tyler had been instrumental in our early days, but he saw GreenSync as just another investment to maximize, not a mission-driven company. My contemplation was interrupted by an urgent message from Brian. "Check TechWire now." I opened the website to find the headline. EcoMatch launches with $20 million funding. New competitor enters sustainable investment space. My stomach dropped as I read the article. EcoMatch was essentially a carbon copy of GreenSync, founded by a former executive from a major investment bank. Their platform promised the same services we offered, but with lower fees and less stringent vetting of sustainable credentials. I called an emergency meeting with our leadership team. For 2 hours, we dissected EcoMatch's offering and debated our response. "We could lower our fees to match theirs," suggested our finance director. "Or relax our vetting standards to accept more companies," added another executive. I shook my head. Those moves would just start a race to the bottom. We need to double down on what makes us different, our commitment to genuine sustainability and our superior matching algorithm. By the end of the day, we had outlined a strategy. Enhance our impact reporting tools, create an educational content series about authentic sustainable investing, and offer more personalized support for both investors and startups. As the team filed out, Brian lingered. "There's something else you should know," he said quietly. I looked into EcoMatch's backing. One of their major investors is Mitchell Investments, my father's company. The revelation felt like a physical blow. Not only had he refused to support my venture, but he was now backing our direct competitor. That evening, I attended an industry networking event, forcing myself to put on a confident face despite the turmoil inside. As I chatted with a group of tech entrepreneurs, a familiar voice spoke behind me. "Stephanie, I thought I might see you here." I turned to face my father, who looked exactly as he always did, impeccably dressed, not a hair out of place. But something was different in his expression. Was it respect? Or simply acknowledgement that I hadn't failed as he'd expected? "Congratulations on your recent funding round," he said stiffly. "5 million is impressive." "Thank you," I replied, equally formal. "I hear you've invested in EcoMatch. Quite similar to GreenSync, isn't it?" A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. "It's just business, Stephanie. Their model is more aligned with traditional investment metrics." "You mean they care more about profit than actual environmental impact?" I translated. "That's never been GreenSync's approach. And that's why you'll always be limited," he said, though without his usual dismissive tone. "But I will say this, you've proven more resilient than I expected." Coming from him, it was almost a compliment. Almost. "I didn't do it to meet your expectations, Dad. I did it because I believe in what we're building." As we stood there, I realized something profound. I no longer needed his approval. I'd spent years craving his validation, but in its absence, I'd found my own strength and purpose. "I should get back to my colleagues," I said. "Good luck with your investment." As I walked away, I felt lighter somehow. My father's backing of our competitor might have been meant as a slight, but it was actually a gift, confirmation that GreenSync was significant enough to warrant competition. The next morning, I received a call from Jordan Blackwell, the CFO of Leighton Venture Partners who had led our Series A. "I saw the news about EcoMatch," he said. "Are you concerned?" "We're watching them closely," I answered honestly. "But we're focusing on our strengths rather than reacting out of fear." "Good," Jordan said. "Because we've been discussing GreenSync's future internally. How would you feel about a significant expansion opportunity?" By the time I hung up, my mind was racing with possibilities. Leighton was interested in doubling their investment to help us expand internationally and develop new tools for measuring and certifying sustainable impact. It was everything we'd hoped for: growth without compromise, expansion without diluting our mission. And it had come precisely because we'd stayed true to our values in the face of pressure to conform. As I shared the news with our team, I couldn't help but think about how far we'd come from that graduation day text. My father had cut me off, thinking I would come crawling back when my pipe dream failed. Instead, his rejection had forced me to find my own path, my own supporters, and ultimately, my own definition of success. The path forward wouldn't be easy. EcoMatch would push us to innovate faster, and Tyler would continue pressing for changes at the board level. But for the first time, I felt truly confident in my ability to navigate these challenges without sacrificing what made GreenSync special. That night, as I worked late in my office, I noticed a new email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read simply, "We need to talk, Dad." GreenSync is officially valued at $500 million in this funding round, announced Jordan Blackwell during our executive meeting. "The board believes we should begin preparing for an IPO within the next 12 months. The conference room fell silent as everyone processed this information. Going public had always been a distant goal, something we'd aim for someday. Now, suddenly, someday had arrived. "Are we ready for that level of scrutiny?" Brian asked, voicing the concern I'm sure everyone felt. Jordan nodded. "Your growth metrics are exceptional. Your technology is proprietary and proven. Most importantly, the market for sustainable investment platforms is expanding rapidly." I looked around the table at my leadership team, 14 talented individuals who had joined GreenSync because they believed in our mission. We'd grown from a tiny startup operating out of a converted storage room to a company that had facilitated over $300 million in sustainable investments. "Let's take the weekend to consider this," I said. "We'll reconvene Monday to discuss next steps." As the meeting broke up, Jordan pulled me aside. There's something else you should know. EcoMatch is struggling. Their latest financial reports show significant user churn. I wasn't surprised. EcoMatch had prioritized growth over quality, accepting any company that could remotely claim sustainability credentials. Investors had quickly realized the difference between their approach and our rigorous vetting process. I'm not celebrating their troubles, I said. But I am glad we stood firm on our standards. Jordan smiled. That's exactly why Leighton believes in GreenSync. Your commitment to authentic sustainability isn't just ethically sound, it's proven to be good business. Back in my office, I stared out the window at the Boston skyline. An IPO would mean intense preparation, endless meetings with bankers and lawyers, and scrutiny of every aspect of our business. It would also mean the ultimate validation of what we'd built. My contemplation was interrupted by my assistant. Your 4 o'clock is here. I froze. My 4 o'clock was a meeting I'd been both anticipating and dreading. My father had asked to see me. After receiving his email a month ago, I delayed responding, unsure whether I wanted to reopen that door. Eventually, curiosity had won out. Jason Mitchell looked older than I remembered as he entered my office. The confidence that had always bordered on arrogance seemed diminished somehow. Thank you for agreeing to meet, he said, remaining standing until I gestured toward the chair across from my desk. What can I do for you? I asked, keeping my tone professional. He looked around my office, taking in the awards on the wall, the view of the harbor, the evidence of success he'd never thought possible. I owe you an apology, he said finally. When you graduated, I thought I was teaching you a valuable lesson about the real world. I was wrong. The admission stunned me into silence. My investment in EcoMatch was misguided, he continued. I thought they had the superior model because they followed conventional wisdom. But you've proven that conventional wisdom isn't always right. Is this a business visit, Dad? Are you here because your investment is tanking? He winced at my directness. I deserve that. But no, that's not why I'm here. He took a deep breath. I'm here because I missed my daughter's journey. Because I was too stubborn to see that you had vision I lacked. Because I want to make amends if it's not too late. Part of me wanted to dismiss his apology as too little, too late. But another part, the part that had longed for his approval for so many years, recognized the difficulty of his admission. Why no? I asked. Because life has a way of clarifying what matters, he said. I had a health scare last month. Nothing serious in the end, but it made me think about my legacy. Not my business legacy, but my personal one. And I realized I'd failed at the most important relationship in my life. We talked for 2 hours that afternoon. He shared things he'd never told me before, how his own father had been cruel and dismissive, how he'd internalized the belief that success only came through hardship, how he'd convinced himself that cutting me off financially was an act of tough love rather than control. I shared my journey too, the nights I'd cried myself to sleep after his rejection, the determination that grew from pain, the belief in my vision that had sustained me when nothing else would. I'm not asking for forgiveness right away, he said as he prepared to leave. I know trust needs to be rebuilt. But I'd like the chance to try if you're willing. I'll think about it, I promised, neither accepting nor rejecting his olive branch. After he left, I sat in contemplation, emotions swirling. The irony wasn't lost on me. My father had returned just as we prepared for an IPO that would cement GreenSync's success and likely make me wealthier than I'd ever imagined. Was his timing suspicious? Perhaps. But the vulnerability in his eyes had seemed genuine. The following weeks were consumed with IPO preparations. Our leadership team worked with investment bankers to prepare the S-1 filing. Lawyers combed through every aspect of our business for potential liabilities. Financial analysts created projections that would determine our initial offering price. Through it all, I maintained limited contact with my father, occasional texts, a brief coffee meeting. I was cautious, protecting myself from potential disappointment while leaving the door open to reconciliation. 2 months into our IPO preparations, we faced a significant hurdle. Our audit revealed a potential issue with how we'd structured our international expansion. Nothing illegal, but something that could delay our filing by months if not addressed quickly. We need specialized legal counsel on this, our attorney advised. Someone who understands both sustainable business models and international securities law. That evening, I received a text from my father. Heard about your regulatory challenge. Mitchell Investments dealt with something similar last year. Happy to introduce you to the attorney who helped us, no strings attached. I hesitated, then accepted his offer. The attorney he recommended was brilliant, helping us restructure our international entities in a way that satisfied regulatory requirements without compromising our mission. When I thanked my father, his response surprised me. You've built something remarkable, Stephanie. Something with purpose beyond profit. It's taken me too long to see it, but what you've created matters. Coming from a man who had measured success solely in financial terms, this acknowledgement of GreenSync's broader purpose meant more than any compliment about its valuation. As our IPO date approached, the pace became frantic. I barely left the office, working 18-hour days to ensure everything was perfect. One night, around midnight, my assistant delivered a package that had been courier delivered to our building. Inside was a small wooden box with my name engraved on top. When I opened it, I found a handwritten note from my father, for the daughter who proved that vision and values can coexist with success. I couldn't be prouder. Beneath the note was a vintage compass that had belonged to my grandfather. According to family lore, he'd used it to navigate during his service in World War II, keeping it as a reminder that, even in the darkest times, one could find direction. The gift brought tears to my eyes, not because of its monetary value, but because it represented something my father had never offered before, genuine respect for the path I had chosen. The night before our IPO announcement, our entire leadership team gathered in our conference room. Jordan had just confirmed our opening price, significantly higher than we'd initially projected due to strong investor interest. To GreenSync, Brian toasted, raising a glass of champagne. And to Stephanie, who never wavered in her vision even when the path was hardest. As everyone clinked glasses, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. Whatever happens tomorrow, remember that true success isn't measured by stock prices. It's measured by impact. And you've already succeeded beyond measure. I smiled, realizing that perhaps the greatest outcome of this journey wasn't the impending financial windfall or professional validation. It was that both my father and I had grown in ways neither of us could have anticipated on that graduation day 4 years ago. As I looked around at the team that had become my family, I felt a sense of completion. We stood on the precipice of a new chapter for GreenSync, one that would bring new challenges and opportunities. But whatever came next, I knew that staying true to our core values had brought us here, and those same values would guide us forward. The morning of our IPO announcement dawned bright and clear. I arrived at the office at 6 a.m., hours before trading would begin. The entire leadership team had gathered in our conference room, eyes fixed on the large screens displaying financial news channels. Brian handed me a coffee. Ready for this? I nodded, though my stomach was filled with butterflies. After years of work, sacrifice, and unwavering belief in our mission, GreenSync was about to become a publicly traded company. Our valuation would no longer be theoretical. The market would decide what we were worth. At 8:30 a.m., my phone rang. Jordan Blackwell's name flashed on the screen. "Stephanie," he said when I answered, his voice brimming with excitement. "The opening bell is about to ring. Initial orders are coming in strong, much stronger than projected. We're looking at an opening price of $47 per share. Our projected opening had been $35. This put GreenSync's valuation at just over $2 billion. $2 billion, I whispered after hanging up, hardly able to believe it. The room erupted in cheers. Hugs were exchanged. A few tears were shed. Someone popped a bottle of champagne despite the early hour. I stepped away from the celebration to call my mother. She had been my constant supporter, believing in me even when I'd struggled to believe in myself. "Mom," I said when she answered, my voice catching. "We did it." "Oh, honey," she replied, and I could hear the tears in her voice. "I've never doubted you for a second. Your father called me last night, you know. He said it was the proudest day of his life." After speaking with my mother, I sent a text to my father. Thank you for your support these past few months. GreenSync opened at $47 per share. I'd like to have dinner this weekend to talk about what comes next. His reply came quickly. I'd be honored. This is your moment, Stephanie. Enjoy every second of it. As I rejoined the celebration, I couldn't help reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. From that crushing text on graduation day to this moment of triumph, the path had been neither straight nor easy. But every obstacle, every rejection, every doubt had shaped GreenSync into what it had become. That afternoon, I gathered our now 30-person team for a champagne toast. Today marks a milestone for GreenSync, I began, looking around at the faces of those who had joined our mission. But while the stock ticker and valuation are exciting, they're not what defines our success. Our success is measured by the sustainable businesses we've helped fund, by the environmental innovations we've supported, by staying true to our values even when it would have been easier to compromise. I raised my glass. To everyone who believed in GreenSync when it was just an idea. To those who joined us when we worked out of a storage room with spotty Wi-Fi. To those who chose purpose alongside profit. This success belongs to all of you. After the toast, I returned to my office to find a courier-delivered package waiting on my desk. Inside was a framed item, my father's graduation day text message printed alongside today's IPO announcement. A note was attached, from rejection to $2 billion. You did this on your own terms. With respect and admiration, Dad. I smiled, appreciating the gesture for what it was, an acknowledgement of both my journey and his mistake. I decided it would hang in my office as a reminder that rejection can be the beginning of something extraordinary rather than the end. That evening, as the excitement began to settle, I sat alone in my office looking out at the Boston skyline. GreenSync's journey from concept to publicly traded company had been remarkable by any standard. But the true value wasn't in our stock price, it was in what we'd built and why we'd built it. We had created a platform that channeled millions of dollars into businesses addressing climate change, resource conservation, and sustainable development. We had proven that profit and purpose could coexist. And personally, I had discovered strength I never knew I possessed. The following week, I launched a new initiative. The GreenSync Foundation, funded with 5% of my personal shares from the IPO. Its mission was to support young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds who were developing sustainable business solutions. At our first mentorship event, I shared my story with a group of aspiring entrepreneurs. For years ago, I received a text from my father telling me I was on my own, I told them. At the time, it felt like the worst moment of my life. Now I recognize it as the push I needed to find my own path. A young woman raised her hand. Did you ever doubt yourself? Constantly, I admitted. But I learned that doubt doesn't have to stop you. It can make you more careful, more thorough, more determined to prove yourself right. Another participant asked, "What's the most important lesson you learned?" I thought for a moment before answering. That success isn't defined by other people's expectations. It's defined by creating something that aligns with your values and serves a purpose beyond profit. And sometimes, the people who doubt you the most are the ones who teach you the most about your own strength. As I looked at these young faces filled with ambition and uncertainty, much as I had been 4 years ago, I felt profound gratitude for my journey, challenges, and all. The path from that graduation day text to the IPO had transformed not only my professional life, but my understanding of myself and my relationships. My father and I were slowly rebuilding our connection, this time based on mutual respect rather than expectations. My sense of purpose had deepened, and my definition of success had evolved beyond recognition. GreenSync's future would bring new challenges, of course. Going public meant new pressures, new stakeholders, new expectations. But the core values that had guided us from the beginning would continue to light our way forward. That night, as I finally headed home, I realized that the greatest triumph wasn't the IPO or the valuation. It was discovering that rejection can be redirection, that obstacles can become opportunities, and that sometimes being on your own is exactly what you need to find your true path. What about you? Has someone's doubt ever motivated you to prove them wrong? Has rejection ever led you to something better than you'd originally hoped for? Share your story in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need this reminder. Sometimes the text that says you're on your own is the beginning of your greatest success story. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, your path may not be easy, but it can be extraordinary.